All right, we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining the Q&A session for the discussion draft of the Hillcrest Focused Plan Amendment. My name is Shannon Kaur, and I just realized this is an old slide and it has my old last name, but I am a senior planner with the City Planning Department and the project manager for the Hillcrest Focused Plan Amendment. And joined with me presenting tonight is Claudia Brizuela, Senior Traffic Engineer, also with the city. And then we have two planners that are kind of behind the scenes tonight, Selena Sanchez-Bailon and Aparna Padmakumar. They're going to be helping with some of the logistics of tonight's meeting. Just a couple housekeeping items. We have the Q&A function for tonight where you can ask questions that we can answer to. We also have the chat function that you can share comments with staff. And I don't think we're going to have a problem, given the folks that are in this meeting tonight, getting to everybody's comments and questions. But if for whatever reason we don't answer all of your questions, we can definitely follow up with you later on. And then later, when we do get to the feedback portion, we will ask you to use your raise hand function, and then we can promote you to a panelist so you can share your video and unmute yourself to discuss with us. And as a just notification, this meeting is being recorded, so we will put it up on the planhillcrest.org website after tonight's meeting, along with the presentation. So here is a quick agenda. We're going to go through some introduction and background information, and then provide an overview of the discussion draft. Then we'll conclude with timeline and next steps. And then we'll get into the question portion of the evening, and we'll ask you all for your feedback. So the Hillcrest Focused Plan Amendment aims to amend the Uptown Community Plan, which was last updated in 2016. Here we have the boundary for the Focused Plan Amendment, which encompasses approximately 350 acres. And through this process, we aim to identify housing opportunities and mobility and public space enhancements to help connect the community, among other objectives. So here are the 5 objectives of the Hillcrest Focused Plan Amendment: to celebrate the legacy of the LGBTQ+ community, to create public spaces and parks, to strengthen connections, to support local businesses, and to address housing needs. And here's our timeline. We first launched this Focus Plan Amendment back in 2020. And over the past 3 years, we've done a lot of engagement, a lot of concept development that the community has played such an important role in as we've revised those concepts multiple times. We've gone to Planning Commission a couple times for workshops. We've done a couple surveys online with the community. And so we're very excited to be at the point where we have a discussion draft out for public review. It will be out for public review until November 17th. Then later on in the month, on November 30th, we plan to go to the Planning Commission for a 3rd workshop. And then we start the process of revising the plan to come out with the next draft. And in early 2024, we'll start the environmental review process and come out with that next draft. There will be another public review process. And then we aim to go through the hearing process for adoption in summer of next year. So the Focus Plan Amendment discussion draft is available now for your review, and we really encourage you to submit your feedback if you haven't done so already. You can download the amendment at planhillcrest.org, and you can also download an associated document that summarizes all the changes contained in the discussion draft. That helps it really, makes it very helpful to go through the discussion draft. I'll now provide an overview of what the discussion draft includes. Out of the 11 chapters of the Uptown Community Plan, the main changes you'll see are to the chapters land use, mobility, urban design, and implementation. And we've also added a new chapter for the LGBTQ plus culture. So these are the changes that are more substantial. Then there's also minor changes to the chapters on the right side of the screen. Economic prosperity, public facility services and safety, recreation, conservation, noise, and historic preservation. The edits to these chapters are more minor and mostly to, correct any typos, to reflect text and policies that reflect any citywide documents or policies that have been adopted since 2016, to just make these chapters all up to date. Beginning with the first chapter with more substantial changes is the land use chapter. The largest change to the land use chapter is the incorporation of the proposed land use designations in the broader Uptown land use map. The new land uses follow a similar pattern to the current land use map, with community, commercial, and residential areas remaining, but with increases to allowed densities. In the core and the commercial corridors increase up to 218 or 290 dwelling units per acre, with residential areas increasing up to 73 dwelling units on the lower end to 109 and 218 dwelling units on the higher end. And these new land uses will allow us to address housing needs, as it adds capacity for an additional 19,000 homes throughout the life of this community plan, or approximately the next 30 years. This will allow us to meet citywide climate goals as outlined in our climate action plan by placing more homes near jobs, destinations, and transit. And it's important to point out that although the plan adds home capacity for the area for a maximum of up to 19,000 homes, the city cannot compel homes to be built. The city cannot mandate development to occur, but through this amendment, it can update zoning and create policies in the community plan that encourages and guides new development. While the community plans provide a long-term vision, in the near and midterm, properties with existing buildings are going to incrementally redevelop. The added home capacity does not equate to the number of new homes that will be constructed. It's going to be up to individual property owners to develop as they please. I also want to clarify that we are not proposing any changes to single-family land use designations. The blue dashed line is the outline of the Hillcrest Focused Plan Amendment boundary. So you can see all the low residential land uses, which are shown kind of in yellow or light tan, are outside of the Focused Plan Amendment boundary. And here are the zones that we are considering for the amendment, which include a mix of residential multi-unit or multiple unit and community commercial zones. The RM 410, 411, CC 310, and CC 311 zones do not include a height limit, but buildings will be limited in size based on FAR allowances, which are outlined in the column on the right. Floor area ratio is the ratio of a building's total floor area to the size of the piece of land upon which it is built. In simple terms, a higher FAR means taller buildings, while a lower FAR results in shorter structures. In the Focused Plan Amendment area, it's likely that we'll see mid-rise buildings with smaller units. The maximum FAR that is proposed is 8.0 through the CC 311 zone. To give you an example of how tall a building may be, if we had a 30,000 square foot lot, there would be an allowed 240,000 square feet of building floor space. Each floor of a building would likely have a range of 16 to 20,000 square feet. So the building would likely be around 12 to 15 stories. after we account for ground floor public spaces and other design requirements addressed in the community plan and in the zone. I also want to point out, as shown with the asterisks, that 2 of these zones are new zones that we're considering for this focus plan amendment area, but would be added to the municipal code so that other communities in the city could also use these zones. And as we see in this example rendering, like I said, we'll likely see mid-rise building heights. And this is a great opportunity to bring more homes to Hillcrest near high-frequency transit corridors. Moving on to the mobility chapter.
Good evening, everyone. As Shanna had mentioned, my name is Claudia Brizuela, and I'm battling a cold at the moment, so I'm very stuffed up. I apologize if what I'm saying is not as clear. But in terms of mobility, we're planning for all modes of transportation. This community is already walkable and bikeable community with frequent transit, and the plan builds upon that to ensure that the vibrant community has desirable and functional options to get around the community. I'll provide in more detail about each mode that's included with the plan, starting with the pedestrian amenities in the plan. The discussion graph pedestrian enhancements are shown on this slide. As proposed for several locations within the Focus Plan Amendment, promenades and urban parkways will provide the opportunity for larger walkways with street trees for shade and other pedestrian amenities. The plan also proposes intersection improvements like lead pedestrian intervals, continental crosswalks, and locations for shortening pedestrian crossing distances through curb extensions, also known as bulb outs, and pedestrian refuge islands. Many of the mobility improvements proposed build upon SANDAG's regional plan and regional transit investments planned for the community. There are currently several MTS bus routes and rapid transit routes providing service to the Hillcrest area, with the regional transit investments of commuter rail, light rail or streetcar, and next-gen rapid buses planned to come online in the future. Some of the recommendations currently proposed are to have dedicated space for transit along Washington Street, 6th Avenue, University Avenue, to accommodate future transit service and where transit is currently affected by congestion. Focusing on low-stress bike facilities, there are existing facilities along 4th and 5th Avenue, as well as Park Boulevard and University Avenue currently existing within the community plan area. Our recommended bike network includes several separated bike facilities in addition to 4th and 5th Avenue, as well as primarily along University Avenue and Park Boulevard. There are also Class 2 bike lanes proposed along residential streets like Robinson Avenue, Cleveland, 3rd Avenue, and Bachman Place. Many of these roadways are residential streets with low speeds, multiple driveways, and low traffic volumes where Class 2 facilities are suitable. I'd also like to mention that we are identifying the Class 1 facility along the Normal Street Promenade from University Avenue to Polk. This promenade is really a focal point for the community, and you can see several bike facilities connecting to the promenade. We focus not only on providing low-stress connections within the community, but also to hospitals and nearby communities as well. This slide shows our recommended vehicular network for the planned area. Many of the existing classifications of streets will remain as they are today. I will go over the main changes in the next slide. However, I wanted to bring your focus to University Avenue and Robinson Avenue. The main changes we have proposed with regards to the vehicular network is a conversion to a one-way couplet along a portion of University Avenue and Robinson Avenue. Shown on this slide with green arrows, the proposed recommendation is to have University Avenue operate as a westbound roadway for motorists between 1st and 9th Avenue, and to have Robinson Avenue between 1st and 10th Avenue serving eastbound motorists. This is very similar to how 4th and 5th Avenue operate today within the community, in which parallel streets serve a specific direction of traffic. Transit and bicycle facilities that were previously discussed would maintain two-way operation along both streets. However, cars would be limited to one direction of travel. The one-way couplet accommodates transit and bike improvements while continuing to provide access to vehicles. Another major change identified in purple on this slide is along University Avenue from 9th Avenue to Park Boulevard and beyond, which maintains its two-way operation of the street and provides dedicated space within the roadway for center running transit and separated bicycle facilities. Mobility hubs are places of connectivity where different travel options come together and serve as the connection between land use and transportation. They provide an integrated suite of mobility services and amenities to better connect transit to an individual's origin or destination. The entire Hillcrest Focused Plan Amendment boundary currently uses multiple modes for travel, and this plan is looking to continue to encourage this. Hillcrest is identified in the region by SANDAG as a mobility hub. I've presented on a lot of different improvements for each mode, but understanding how everything connects, especially for those trips made by multiple modes, is very important because every mile counts. This slide highlights some of the advantages of the proposed mobility networks. We've identified transit priority along Washington Street, 6th Avenue, University, and Park Boulevard through dedicated transit lanes. We're recommending conversion to a one-way couplet along University Avenue and Robinson Avenue. We're preserving emergency access to fire station number 5 and hospitals in the area. And we're accommodating all users along our roadways by ensuring people of all modes can safely travel in the area, as well as having those continuous bicycle and transit facilities that span beyond the community.
Now to speak to the urban design chapter. Updates to the urban design chapter will complement the proposed land uses and mobility networks by providing a framework for how buildings and the public realm and interact with each other and foster walkable, lively, active streets. Through allowing for taller buildings, we free up more space on the ground floor for unique and creative public space opportunities like promenades, urban parkways, and other public spaces. This chapter has been updated to support these spaces in the Focus Plan Amendment area and to support new supplemental development regulations through a revised community plan implementation overlay zone that I'll further outline in the implementation chapter. Moving on to the new LGBTQ+ culture chapter. This is an all new chapter. And this chapter calls for and outlines an LGBTQ+ cultural district to celebrate and honor the culture and history of the LGBTQ+ community in Hillcrest. This chapter helps commemorate and highlight the people, spaces, buildings, events, and physical elements that contribute to the history and culture of the community. So it goes through history and culture, and it also summarizes outreach that we did in preparation to create this chapter and goes over some stories in the community. And it also outlines different interpretive elements, shows and outlines a walking corridor map, and also includes policies to guide future implementation of public spaces and programming. And we have a lot of objectives that are outlined in the chapter, but here are a few of them. We want to recognize Hillcrest as a center of community organization and LGBTQ+ activism throughout history and also currently, and as a place that continues to foster racial, ethnic, gender, and cultural diversity. We want to elevate the voices of underrepresented and undervalued populations and organizations, and foster a spirit of pride and solidarity in our community in the face of new opportunities and challenges. We want Hillcrest to continue to offer welcoming, safe spaces for the LGBTQ+ community to gather and express itself freely. In this chapter, we outline different interpretive element examples from artwork, buildings, streetscape, and signage. And we have a lot of wonderful precedent images throughout the chapter for examples. We also outline a LGBTQ plus cultural walking corridor. We envision this as a central element of the cultural district. And we also have identified a starting place for key locations that are important to the community. Moving on to the implementation chapter. Broadly speaking, in this chapter, there are regulations for promenades on University Avenue and Robinson Avenue, and parkway requirements for most corridors within the FPA area. There's also a general regulation that requires sites that are over 25,000 square feet and that are proposing a development over 75,000 square feet to be required to provide public spaces on site and what features are going to be required in those public spaces. This is a map of the community plan implementation overlay zone, and in the two green lines on University Avenue and Robinson Avenue, that's where we are requiring promenades. And then the yellow lines outline locations for urban parkways. There's a lot of general regulations also about maintenance, public access, design, and more as outlined in these supplemental development regulations. And here's some graphics for promenades and urban parkways that outline the width requirements and the feature requirements. And the community plan implementation overlay zone also includes a set of supplemental development regulations to regulate a proposed Hillcrest Historic District, covering approximately 32 parcels, generally around Fifth Avenue and University Avenue. This district boundary has been narrowed down from a larger boundary that was previously identified through the 2016 Uptown Community Plan update. And it was recommended for future evaluation to determine its historic eligibility. Historic research and results from an intensive survey identified this smaller area, as shown on this slide, as eligible for a designation as a historic district due to its architecture as the historic commercial core of Hillcrest and for its association with the LGBTQ plus community, containing a concentration of buildings which housed LGBTQ plus businesses and organizations. Processing of this historic district nomination requires outreach to impacted property owners and will include tenant and community members as well, tenants of the shops along here as well as community members. And this outreach is planned to begin soon this year. And the outreach will be followed by public hearings, including 2 hearings with the Historical Resources Board and possibly a city council hearing if appealed. And this historic district nomination outreach and hearing process is following a parallel but separate track of the Focused Plan Amendment. But we wanted to include supplemental development regulations to support this potential future historic district. We're proposing supplemental development regulations for both contributing resources and non-contributing resources that pertain to the design of buildings regarding building height with a maximum height of 100 feet, that also pertain to the facade of buildings and step backs after 30 feet to maintain the street wall and the feel of the street within the historic district. These supplemental development regulations will allow us to preserve the historic significance and feel of the district without precluding density and taller buildings to come to this area. We also have a supplemental development regulation for an LGBTQ plus interpretive trail to support our cultural district. And also requirements for noticing for new residents that are moving into the cultural district area. This is something that was highly supported by the business community as they struggle with noise complaints from neighboring residents. Now, moving on to the chapters that have minor updates. The changes to these chapters have been because of changes on the ground since 2016 when we had our update. So for example, adding or removing park opportunities, updating public facilities that have been built, like the fire station and the Mission Hills Hillcrest Knox Library, and updating the latest on the ground historic resources as well. Changes also are to reflect citywide policy changes. We've adopted the Parks Master Plan and Build Better SD. Other changes pertain to updating with more current data and updating text and policies to support changes in the other chapters. Now, to get into next steps, we really would love to receive as much feedback as possible on the discussion draft by November 17th. And just to kind of go over some of the things we've heard so far, because we've already received almost 300 comments on the discussion draft. There's been concerns for increased density and questions around that. Also, support for us to address the affordable housing crisis. There's been concerns around vehicle circulation, also the safety of people on bikes, and also people have expressed the need for more public spaces. There's also been support for, as we've heard concerns about the increased density. We've also received support for the density that we are proposing and excitement for new housing opportunities being added to Hillcrest. There's been support around the noise policies we've included, a lot of support around what we are doing to promote inclusive spaces for the LGBTQ+ community, and also support for the transit network and all the connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists that we are proposing. So to wrap up, to reiterate, next steps and future major milestones, I'll say it again, submit your feedback on the discussion draft by November 17th. And then we'll be going to Planning Commission for the third workshop on November 30th. Then we'll start working on the next draft, and we plan to release the next draft of the community plan in the new year and begin the environmental review process. And then we aim to go through the hearing process for adoption in summer of next year. So thank you so much for taking the time to join this session tonight. And if you're here, it's probably because you have looked at the discussion draft. And so please submit your feedback to us, because this is, your feedback is super valuable in helping us get it to the next draft. So we can begin the answering questions. So yes, use the Q&A function if you would like to just type your questions and we can answer them out loud. And then if you would like to unmute yourself and share your video, then use your raise hand function, and then we can promote you to a panelist to do so. All right, so Bill, thank you so much for your question. Bill asked, how will the increased density impact the Hillcrest community? Very broad question. Overall, I think this is going to be a great opportunity to connect more homes to transit to help reduce our climate to help reduce, greenhouse gases and achieve our climate action plan goals. Also, by allowing, taller buildings, we're gonna, and through the supplemental development regulations that we've included in the implementation chapter, we're gonna be seeing more public spaces. So that's gonna be a really positive impact on people living here. These improved sidewalks, wider sidewalks are going to help bring connections to Balboa Park and just help connect people throughout the community. Thank you, Michael. I see your comment. Excellent draft. I know there are updates to the general plan, Blueprint San Diego, and the mobility plan. Will the timing of the release of this amendment incorporate those changes? So, yes, it will. And then when we come out with the next draft as well, we'll have some the environmental documents and any of the technical analysis that's associated with that, including one for mobility. And yes, Blueprint San Diego is moving forward as well and is planned to be adopted, around the same time as this. Thank you. Okay, one more for Bill because he put in 2 questions here, and then we'll move on to Mike, who has his hand up. Claudia, this might be a question for you to answer about the parking spaces. Would you like to answer that?
Yeah. So to answer your question, Bill, yes, there will be some parking spaces that are that will be repurposed in order for us to implement those transit and bike improvements that we've identified in the discussion draft. Early in the next year, I'll have a document that'll go over and explicitly state the locations where parking will be repurposed or removed in order to fit in what some of our planned improvements are. And you'll be able to go through each line item to see where exactly that will take place.
All right, Mike, we are going to promote you to a panelist. So it's going to seem like you're getting kicked out of the meeting for 3 seconds, but you're not. You're being promoted as a panelist. I'm going to do that right now. And Mike, you should be able to unmute and share your show your video whenever you're ready. Not sure. I'm pressing ask to unmute for Mike. If you would like, you could also type your question into the Q&A if you're unable to speak. All right, well, while we're waiting for Mike, Sharon has also put in some questions in the chat. How will this plan help the city implement its climate action plan goals? Going back to bringing more homes near transit and near destinations overall is going to reduce how much people have to drive. So that is, the biggest impact that this is going to have to help address our climate action plan goals. She also asked, how will this plan help meet the city's housing goals? Well, We are proposing to add 19,000, a capacity of 19,000 homes. And of course, this won't be built overnight, because this really is meant to serve the community for the next 30 years. It will allow for more development and density to be built. And, we hope to see developers utilize that new density. All right, Sharon is on a roll with the questions. Let me answer her last one out of 3. How will this plan reduce employee traffic in and out of Hillcrest? Great question. Early on, when we launched this project, we did a study, and we saw that there's, I want to say it was close to like 16,000 employees that work in Hillcrest. So that results in so many commutes in and out of the community. Only a very, very small percentage, I don't remember the percentage off the top of my head, but it is very little, like 5% or less of people that live in Hillcrest also work in Hillcrest. So this is going to bring more housing opportunities for people to live and work in the same community. All right, Claudia, Zach's question is a good one for you. First, he said, thanks to the team for all of our work, and that he really looks forward to seeing this plan approved. Thank you, Zach. And Claudia, he's asking, do we have a timeline for how long it will take to build out the improved transit and bicycle network shown in the plan?
Good question, Zach. To answer your question, we don't have a specific timeline. Some of the improvements could be implemented through resurfacing, as we're resurfacing our streets, such as a lot of the bicycle improvements, and that's kind of how we've been implementing them more frequently. While some of the more larger efforts, like the one-way couplet or the dedicated transit facilities, those would be added more as a capital improvement project. It require a lot more funding and a lot more design in there to have that implemented. So to answer your question, there may be some bike improvements that can be implemented fairly soon, but I would say more of the transit improvements might take more years to build.
All right, William, thank you for your question. He has written, regarding public spaces, specifically the promenades on University and Robinson, when will you develop a master plan, and how will improvements be paid for? And then he mentions downtown in the 14th Street Promenade, and that it's taken, after 17 years, only 4 blocks have been completed. I'm not super familiar with this in the downtown community plan, but these promenades will be built when developers come in to develop their properties. We're not necessarily proposing for a whole promenade to be built all at once, which of course, if somehow funding was obtained, it absolutely, isn't out of the realm of possibility and would be wonderful. But the way that we've written these regulations in the community plan implementation overlay zone is really to get developers, when they're proposing a development, to be a part of a better future and better connectivity in Hillcrest, and to do their part. And we're requiring them to implement these things when development happens. All right. Bill has another question here. When will the replaced block known as 3775 6th Avenue be completed? One would assume that this will be the likely model for other development. I'm gonna have to get out Google Maps and remind myself where that one is. Give us a second. We'll come back to your question. Okay, Mike has his question typed out. Sorry, Mike, I wasn't sure why you weren't able to share your screen and unmute yourself. My apologies for that. Will there be transit options from Hillcrest to the trolley for those who do not work in Hillcrest or downtown? Claudia, this sounds like it's one
Yeah.
for you.
I can answer it. Shannon, if you're able to maybe go back to the mobility, the transit slide, I can kind of walk through that a little bit more. Mike, to answer your question, Sandag's done a good job at identifying multiple connections to the Hillcrest area. What you see in, I call it dark purple, maybe it's blue, blue lines. Those are what's called commuter rail. And so those are supposed to connect directly downtown to and further up north to our employment areas and universities. So those will serve as a connection. In addition, there's also a light rail or it can be streetcar in the future. We're still kind of working through that. That will also serve as another connection between Hillcrest and downtown, as well as connecting to other neighborhoods like Golden Hill and North Park and South Park. What you see in greenish lines are what's called our next gen rapid. So these are faster serving buses with less stops. So it gets you to your destinations more quickly. And those are intended to provide connections to various locations, Ocean Beach, La Mesa, Kearney Mesa, so many of the destination points in the region. Thank you, Shannon, for going to the slide.
No problem. And Bill, I was able to look up that that site that you mentioned, and I'm not able to speak to when it's going to be built. It's still going through the permit review process. But yes, we will keep close attention to that as it furthers through the development process. And also I saw Mike had kind of a two-part question. The second one was, will there be restrictions on developers for new builds? Examples, parking required or low-income housing units offered. For Claudia, sorry, did you speak to parking? Would you like to speak to parking?
I didn't answer, but yeah, I don't mind speaking. With regards to new development, the entirety of Hillcrest is what's called a transit priority area because there's a lot of frequent transit in the area. It's very suitable to not provide as much parking. We currently have in place no minimum parking required for multifamily housing developments within our transit priority areas. So to answer your question, no parking is required. With regards to low-income housing units, Shannon, maybe you'd be able to speak to that one. Thanks.
Yeah. So we have citywide policies for inclusionary housing. So there's inclusionary housing policies that are required for all developments to comply with. They have to. And then there's also still, citywide affordable housing incentive programs that are still going to be available to any developer. All right. we are. Please type in any additional questions that you have or raise your hand. We still have more time tonight, but if we don't have any further questions, then we can conclude for this evening. All right, William, thank you. He has asked, news reports have talked about 20 to 30 story buildings in the planned Hillcrest area. Have you heard from any developers proposing such projects in this area? Nope. Nope. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, given the FARs that we are considering, which is a maximum of 8.0, we're likely to see more middle rise buildings, around 15 stories. So, but then to speak to if we've heard of anyone considering that tall of buildings, no, we have not. And Mike, how did you determine 109 to 200 unit dwellings was the appropriate number on Normal Street? A big factor we considered was the Normal Street Promenade, which, hopefully will break ground soon and be developed. And with such an amazing, amenity, a public space amenity in the community, we wanted to make sure that that street is able to be activated with mixed use development. And instead of just having, that type of density along the other major commercial corridors, Normal Street seemed appropriate for that dwelling unit density allotment. All right, type in your questions or we will conclude. All right, thank you, Mike. All right. Thank you very much. Now I see you guys saying thank you. All right, well, I appreciate you all. Definitely reach out to us if you have any further questions. We'll put the presentation and the recording up on our website. Again, we have till November 17th for you all to submit your feedback on the discussion draft, and we just can't thank you enough for being engaged and involved in helping us with this project. So thank you and have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.